Welcome to BWI Live. It is a big show as always. We only have 3 hours to talk here during the week, and there's always more conversation than will fit in the show. But we're going to cram as much as possible into the next 60 minutes. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Sean Fitz and Ryan Snyder with me are recruiting insiders, but obviously Penn State, Wisconsin coming up this weekend, so we'll preview the game as our final thing that we do live on air until Saturday. We'll preview the game coming up at the end of the show. We'll talk about Penn State practice yesterday and, of course, recruiting news. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to know. So if you are here, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please like the video and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We crested the 15,000 mark, which I told you before we did that. First off, thank you. And secondly, now I'm just going to be staring at the bottom of the next hill, and 1,000 subscriptions is the next goal. So let's get to 16,000 together. Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder with me. Fitz, high-level takeaways from the last 24 hours of Penn State football. Anything on your mind as we start the show?
No. It's a lot of theater last night.
Did you release a statement before?
I did not release a statement prior to this podcast. Obviously, yesterday, the seriousness of I have abstained from being close to joking about this since the summer because the seriousness of the charges against Kevion Keys and Jameel Lyons, obviously awful stuff. And hopefully the legal system plays out to the extent that it will. So I'm going to stay away from that. But yeah, it certainly took a turn last night in terms of the public facing of this. Penn State had their media session as they do every Wednesday after practice. It was preceded by a university spokesman or sports information spokesman reading the statement that came out earlier, saying they weren't taking questions on it. Then there was a question on it. And then James Franklin walks away. The spokesman comes back, reads the statement again. There's another question on it. He comes back, same thing happens. Like I said, a lot of theater from both sides. And I don't think many people came away looking particularly great on that. So, and then beyond that, we got a couple of questions and it was a pretty worthless session, to be honest with you. So fun little Wednesday, as always.
Yeah, cut the tension with an injury question right after all of that. So, just a great, if you want to watch the full exchange, of course, we have it on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, your home for Penn State, James Franklin press conferences. So you can go, it won't take you very long. I would even say you go during the show and come back because it's only about 4 minutes and 11 seconds. So check that out. You can see the full exchange as Fitz talked about. We'll get into Penn State practice here in just 1 second. But Ryan, I'm going to lead off with you. There was some Penn State recruiting news which came out recently. And I want to get your thoughts on what we saw this week from one of our national reporters putting out a prediction here for a good news for Penn State football.
Yeah, we will see where this goes. But Brandon Finney, of course, we've talked about the McDonough cornerback a lot, dating back to really last winter. But, of course, then he commits to Oregon in the summer. And here he comes back circling around and looks very serious about Penn State. I mean, this was a player who admitted when he committed to Oregon that he was leaning towards Penn State basically the entire time up until that final official visit. And, McDonough, of course, those connections, Kenny Sanders, Terry Smith, great recruiters, of course, stay on him. And here we go. This will look like we might have some drama, some news to follow here in the coming weeks. Of course, he just visited for the UCLA game in early October. We'll see if he's able to make it up for what would be Washington. He has a game for the Ohio State game. They play Gilman that day, so he wouldn't be able to make it for the next upcoming game on November 2nd. But we will certainly be looking forward to seeing if he makes it to campus here for that Washington game. But yeah, Chad Simmons puts in a pick, thinks that Brandon Finney is close to flipping to Penn State. And look, Sean, I mean, I think you would agree. We've heard a lot of positive talk, especially since that UCLA visit. My thought was that this was probably going to go the distance, going down, especially with National Signing Day or the early signing period, being moved up to early December. At the time, he was talking about taking an official visit to Michigan. Well, now, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. I think Penn State's going to really press hard here to maybe try and get this over the line here in the coming weeks. But right now, there's a lot of momentum on the Nittany Lions side. And look, another McDonough guy, right? I mean, what are they? They're batting 5 for 5, 6 for 6 as far as McDonough guys that they have really absolutely pushed hard for over the last however many years, 6, 7 years, I think it is. And they don't want to let one of those players get out of their grasp. So we will keep a very close eye on Brandon Finney. But Chad Simmons is putting in a pick. We're hearing positive things. I think there's a lot for fans to be excited about.
Fitz, when it comes to not just the importance of Finney with a McDonough connection, but also the quality of the prospect. What I don't need a ranking in terms of like 1 through 5, but where would you say he generally is on that scale of players they've gotten out of McDonough? Because to me, like, he is closer to denying Dennis Sutton in terms of the talent and the potential, as opposed to any of the other players we've seen recently. So I guess, what's your opinion on the quality of the player here as well?
Yeah, I think he's up there with Denai, with Curtis Jacobs as well. Jacobs was really highly regarded coming out as a prospect as well. But I mean, he's a 5-star in 24/7. We got him in the top 100. I think Rivals is the only place that doesn't have him as a top 100 prospect. So I believe that would, if he were to flip to Penn State, that would put him right up top in terms of.
He would be.
Top
Yeah, he's number 51 in the industry, which
Okay.
Penn State doesn't have a single top 100 guy right now.
Well, then, yes, by math's sake, yes, that would be it. This is a guy they've been after for a long time, and obviously it was a gut shot. There was a couple of those this summer when you take a look at the ones that changed drastically very quickly, and this was the sort of the hallmark, the brand for that one. We always thought, Ryan and I always thought, that Penn State was kind of where his heart was, and then some things happened. Oregon obviously is very attractive to some folks, and then kind of stopped and flipped on a dime. I still think that he does like Oregon. I know that there's some family dynamics involved here, but I definitely think that the relationships have a huge hold on how this thing ends, not necessarily how it goes throughout the process, but how these things end. And I think that's why you're seeing Penn State with half a dozen, 10 flip targets that are basically circling back around on. I mean, I said that at the start of flip season. That's how they go about trying to find alternate targets late, is guys that they knew earlier, guys that they hosted for official visits, guys, there aren't too many guys that are just fresh on the radar, senior type risers. I know that, they offered Chaz Coleman in Ohio, and there's a couple other guys that are out there that they're watching, but for the most part, the old names are the new names. And I think that that's a testament to the way that they've been able to recruit.
The other thing I always focus on, and Fitz, you and I think sometimes see eye to eye on this, and sometimes it's just best players get them in the class, but the fit of the players together. Finney as a pure outside corner in this particular group, I find that to be another layer of this that I'm focused on in terms of top athlete, top 100 player, also positionally a guy they could use in terms of filling out the roster. I guess I'll come back to you then, Ryan. I want to get your thoughts. Do you agree with that, or do you think that their secondary and what they've got so far is already good, and they don't need to necessarily worry about those kind of details?
Yeah, I mean, Jameer feels like he can play a couple different ways. Xavier Thomas obviously feels like a true slot nickel guy, would kind of play. That's where Kenny Wilsey, I think, will play long term. And, Brandon obviously has the length and the speed and all those things that you would expect to be able to be maybe a Joey Porter type of kind of player down the road. But, the one other thing I did want to add on Finney, too, is that, like, it's important to remember that this recruitment kind of started a lot later than so many others. I mean, Penn State didn't offer him until December 2023. And remember, this is a guy from McDonough. Like, they watched everything with McDonough. And obviously a ton of
Ryan,
schools offered. Go ahead.
To put it into context, when did they offer Jeff Exner, his teammate?
As a freshman, yeah. Now, Jeff Exner has ties to Kenny Sanders, is a little different. I mean, Kenny Sanders grew up with Jeff Exner's family. So, I mean, it's a little different with that situation. But, I mean, even Denai and Curtis and some other guys were offered substantially earlier. I mean, the big thing with Brandon, too, was that, like, he didn't really play a lot of corner until, last year, especially late in the year. And that was a big part of it. But where I'm going with this is just that this was kind of a recruitment that it really blasted off in April or March, April, May. And then he, like so many other guys, he takes those official visits and kind of feels like he should be making a decision. Then, of course, Jeff Exner made a decision around that same time. But really, when you look back and you kind of see how his recruitment has progressed and gone, it kind of makes sense a little bit that maybe he rushed that recruitment, especially he only visited Oregon, I think, one time before his official visit. So it doesn't surprise me, that he's having second thoughts, and even considering Michigan to some degree. I don't want to completely rule him out, but it does feel like Penn State's the team here. It just makes a lot of sense when you look at how fast that recruitment moved, how quick that flip of a switch kind of came when it came to Oregon as a school that, we knew would be in the mix, but really, wow, all of a sudden he's committing there. That kind of surprised everybody. Just kind of add all these little things up. It doesn't surprise me one bit that, he's seriously reconsidering this.
Fitz, any final thoughts here as we get into the next topic, or is there? Are you good on where we've left things with Brandon Finney heading into, whatever the decision timeline might be if he decides to flip.
Yeah, be pretty monstrous. I mean, like, you think about it, Penn State and Oregon on different ends of the national spectrum, I would say, in terms of recruiting perception and things like that. So to flip an Oregon commit, even though he is a couple hours down the road, would still be a big deal. So and then on top of that, really good player, gives you some flexibility, as Ryan mentioned, in the back end with Josh Johnson, with Jameer Joseph. How do you look at safeties in 2025? You feel like Josh Johnson may have filled that second spot. Do you need another one, or can you flip a corner at some point? They've already done that with Antoine Belgrave Shorter, and they've done it with a handful of guys, over the last couple of years. So I think that that's important in the sense of, hey, this guy's a top 100 player, so obviously you want him. But on top of that, gives you a little bit more flexibility in the back end, and Terry Smith's done a really good job with those guys.
He has. It's been fun to watch the transition from Penn State being a destination for turning into a destination for corners that go on to play in the NFL after, still never having a first round corner, which is still something that blows my mind. And I'm going to bring it up almost every time until it happens, because it is just a wild stat. They've never had a defensive back in the first round. Maybe one of these guys will be the one to break.
Maybe AJ Harris will be that
cycle.
guy. He's playing pretty well right now.
Maybe AJ Harris. Yeah. So we'll have to see. And of course, if Brandon Finney does make
Probably
that
not.
decision, join Blue White Illustrated here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We'll recap all that information for you when it happens. Okay, let's get to practice last night and discuss what we saw from the field. Good time to remind you, if you want to get this information in real time and our what we talk about afterwards in our detailed updates, join BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now for just $1. I can't find my promo graphic. Just $1, promo code PSU1 to get information and access from our premium content, from our premium reporters, Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz. Every once in a while, we throw some stuff in there from my side. I'll go first here, Fitz. Some of the things that we saw from the Penn State offense that I thought was interesting last night, deals with the question I asked James Franklin yesterday, is generally, how do you feel about your health situation going into a game where, we'll get into this later, I think they're going to need their running attack in order to get a decisive win against Wisconsin? Well, both Nick Singleton and Anthony Donko were back at practice, both of them practicing in their normal slots too. So those are the biggest updates from the Penn State offensive side. You can read all that information at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The other thing is, I noticed a different tone, and I want to know, Fitz, did you see this on the defensive side, where it felt like they were scaling things back? Receivers weren't running full routes. They were getting a lead up, a little bit of a build up into the route transition, and then they were focusing on timing and routes instead of, the wear and tear of running every route stem 15 yards down the field or 10 yards down the field. So to me, it felt like they're separating where the starters are getting their reps together and trying to limit those, and then working on getting maybe some of the mileage off the legs as we head into November. From the defensive practice field, did you notice any of those things? And what else did you see?
Not really, because when you go to the defensive practice field, it's sort of, like I said last night, status quo. Like, everything is the same all the time, which is great. Like, it's very regular. You'd like to see a little bit more variability so you can, like, figure out what's different, but it's the same type drills, because we get there the same portion of practice. Then we move on to some one-on-ones, and there was some decent one-on-ones, but yeah, you could see a lot of the younger guys taking the reps there. I don't think that's by design. I think they just kind of throw those guys in there as they will with the first team going, then get some more reps with the younger guys. But last week was really the time for the younger guys, and if you were on the site, was able to highlight 5 likely redshirt. We'll call them likely redshirts, but guys that are going to redshirt this year that had good weeks. And I think one of the interesting things there, Corey Smith was a guy that popped up. And I know I was on the defensive field, but you were on the offensive field. Corey Smith, the Wisconsin native, good week last week. James Franklin actually mentioned him earlier this week as well. So things like trending up for him. We didn't see Quentin Martin when we were out there, but James did mention him afterward in terms of his development. I think it's interesting to look at the parallels between a spot like running back, a spot like defensive end, where you clearly have an upper tier. With defensive end, you got 4 guys. With running back, you got 2 guys. What do you do after that to fill in the gaps to get the either garbage time carries or late snaps or anything like that. Of course, you got Walken, you got Tyler Holsworth out there. This is where you're missing Cam Wallace at running back, but does Corey Smith step in to take a couple of carries here, save that game for Quentin Martin, who has played 3 games, and then all of a sudden you're juggling essentially what they would call an 8-game redshirt with 2 guys. Same thing with Max Granville and Jalen Harvey. Those guys seem to be doing really well for their age group. Like they're not breaking through anytime soon. They're not green light or anything like that, but they're doing enough good things to make them, positive for next spring, basically. So I think that that's a key differentiator between the tiers there. So that's interesting to me because we keep seeing, Jalen Harvey in his number 44, Max Granville in his number 18. And that might not seem like it matters much, but for true freshmen to be a part of that travel squad and get their own numbers instead of having to, hold the placard and run Wisconsin's defense, Wisconsin's offense, whatever it may be. And Corey Smith was in practice squad jersey last night. I think that those things are certain indicators that we're going to see more of them, maybe playing special teams late in the year, maybe just jumping off into bowl practice and into spring or into postseason practice and into spring.
Yeah, and like we said, if you want any of that information, you want to get a really good article from Fitz about the bye week progress of those young players. I found it. Here it is. 2 months for $1. Promo code PSU1. So if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, you can see the code PSU1 in front of you. 2 months for $1 gets you in with all that great information all the way through National Signing Day in December, all the way now almost into the new year at this point. So subscribe now and get all that information. Try us out and then, dive all the way in if you want to. Today's show is brought to you by My Perfect Franchise. Always appreciate Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise for supporting this show here and On3 as a whole. If you're looking to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, if you have skills of a business owner, but you are not a business owner, talk to Andy, because it's not always about doing the most work, the hardest work. Sometimes it's about working smarter. And if you can be your own boss and own a franchise and buy into a stable corporate structure, but also own what you are working for, why wouldn't you want to give that a shot? And that's where his expertise as an owner of multiple franchises himself can come in and place you into the right situation to succeed. There's no guarantees in life, but he's learned the ups and the downs. He's hired friends. He's had to fire people that are close to him. He's had to sell businesses. He's had successes. He has his playbook of how he's going to help you, and he wants to share it with you. So 404-973-9901. He goes through the entire process with you, including when you go to sign the papers, he's there with you. When you go to learn from the CEOs of these companies where you're buying into their franchises, he's there with you to explain what's happening. So at no point are you left in the dark. He also has a new process to help you buy small businesses in your community, so you can check out that as well. Again, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net or 404-973-9901. Appreciate Andy for being a sponsor here on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. Let's get into this week's recruiting news. We've got something we talked about with Fitz on Tuesday. The On 300 rankings for 2026. There was an update. And Ryan, as usual, you break these down and you point where Penn State's prospects and commits are moving around. And you wrote the article over BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But I wanted to get your thoughts on it as you did that deep dive. The interesting positions and players that moved around the board. What did you think?
I think there's a couple things to start with. One, this update is the second major one, I would say. There will obviously be plenty to come. But for this class, On3 originally had about 175 guys or so ranked as 4-star players. Now that the complete On 300 are 4-star players, and I believe there's even a couple outside of it who hold that rating now. So it's really expanded as far as the players that we believe, deserve that distinction. I think the biggest news from a Penn State perspective is Jahshire Rogers. How many times have we talked about him on this show and really since we learned about him in the summer? Incredible athleticism, maybe one of the most athletic players that Penn State has got a commitment from in many classes. Now, Brandon Finney, if he commits to Penn State, he's up there too, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. But he, of course, goes from a 3-star player, talk about Jahshire Rogers, of course, up to a 4-star, mid-pack to about 230-ish range. And I think this is a player who can continue to rise. He's not playing, obviously, this elite competition that some guys are. He's down in Delaware. Played against Silzanium last weekend. Had a decent game from what I saw, although it looked like they kind of kept How do I say his school, Sean? Apoponymic?
I'm not even gonna try it. Yeah,
it's a hard school to pronounce.
I thought you were gonna drop Silesianum on me because I know that one, but yeah, the other one.
I said Silesianum. Anyway, they kind of kept that offense in check. But I mean, all you got to do is just check out Jasir's highlight tapes, and obviously we got to see him, some camps and different things, and boy, he really popped. So I'm not surprised at all that On3 and Charles Power moved him up there. It's really a lot based on athleticism, but at the same time, he's not just a speed guy. I mean, he has great ball control too, great hands. There's a lot of little things there. You just go down this checklist. He's got 8 of the 10. So this is a player that I honestly think if he went to an Under Armour camp and kind of gets out there a little more publicly, that I could see him being a top 150, getting up closer to that top 100 range. I mean, when I look at Lex Cyrus, for example, who's ranked 110, and of course it's different classes, every class has positions that are greater than others as far as depth, but to me, Jasir Rogers pops just as much as Lex Cyrus, and that's not a diss on Lex Cyrus. I like Lex Cyrus a lot. I just see the athleticism and the way he's able to move his body, the twitchiness, all those little things. To me, those two are compatible, and if not, I would kind of lean towards Rogers in a lot of different ways. So, if Lex Cyrus could be 110 in the country, I think that Rogers could be that guy long term. Now, at the same time, if you're Penn State, I don't know that you want him going to an Under Armour camp or any of those major camps, because Penn State knows exactly what they have in Jasir Rogers, and I don't think you want some of those massive SEC schools and others to learn those measures and all those things as well. Time will tell. We'll see. Those camps are a long way off. Just some other guys real quick. Daniel Jennings was already inside the On300, but he's one of those players who was kind of outside the original 4-star range. He's now a 4-star player as well. So in On3's rankings, 5 of Penn State's 6 commits are now 4-star players. And oh, by the way, LeVar Keys, he is the lone 3-star player in the class. He moved up a couple spots to an 88 overall, which is a high 3-star. 89 is the highest, but he was originally an 86. He climbed about 35 spots, I believe it was, in the wide receiver ranking. So it's pretty positive all around. The big news, I think, as far as from a negative perspective, was Troy Hune moving from a top 10 quarterback. I believe he was number 9 previously, down to number 19. The big takeaway there is just they want to see more on the field production. And that was one thing that Charles talked about a lot when he originally got that top, I don't know, was he top 60 or so and a top 10 quarterback, was, hey, we've seen this all throughout camps. He has one of the biggest arms in the classes, all those different things. Now they want to see him really take over some Friday night games and take it to another level. Sean, you've watched more of Hune, I think. Go ahead.
Quick question there. Is this similar in spirit to the Ethan Grunkmeyer conversation, where it's like, the numbers look great, you're great in camp, we need to see you produce wins as a quarterback at the level where you can have that major effect on your team, which he then, did his senior season. Is there any correlation there?
I thought Ethan was kind of the opposite, where it was when he got out to camps and stuff, that's when he started to rock it up. But
yeah, but his junior year, I think they were like 3-9 or something like that.
True.
So maybe they don't play that many games, but they did not have a good record. And I think it was T. Frank that said he wanted to see the wins come across, even though it's not really a quarterback stat, but the play that we saw in camps as, he rose during the spring evaluation period. It wasn't even during his junior year. He rose during the spring evaluation period, got out to the Elite 11, showed off that he had a whip there, and really took off from there. And then it sort of just bled over, kind of the same way Drew did, really. Just kind of bled over into a senior year and the success that came with that. So I think that makes sense. I don't know, Troy's having a better junior year than Grunk, but we really didn't watch Grunk as a junior, to be honest with you. He wasn't a guy that was on the radar at that point. I mean, we knew about him from camp, but we didn't know about him as a prime target and then eventual commit type guy.
Yeah, his top offer at the time was like Northwestern, really, until Penn State offered, obviously late in the cycle. But I think there's other key guys I just want to mention on real quick, guys who aren't committed to Penn State, but players throughout the region who I think we're going to be talking about a lot. Joey O'Brien is right outside the top 100 now. We have him as a safety from LaSalle. By the way, his wide receiver film is just as good.
Did we move him to athlete? I think we moved him to athlete, to be honest.
They did, yes. Yeah.
Should be. Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. I think Penn State's been trending upwards with Joey O'Brien. Notre Dame was certainly in the mix as well. And there will be other schools. But his rise, he's one of those guys who really crushed it on the 7-on-7 circuit this past summer, and really the past 2 summers, playing with, who's the wide receiver, Sean?
Torrey
That's
Smith.
the 7-on-7. Thank you. Yeah, Torrey Smith's team. So he's we saw it in the 7-on-7 really the past 2 years, and now it has really blossomed. And LaSalle's a great team. I mean, they're going to make a run, I think, through the state playoffs here in the coming weeks. We'll see where things go. Although they do have to play prep, I think, to get through. But anyway, long story short, he's really rising up right now. Like I said, 104 in the country, a player that Penn State's going to be in the mix with. A couple others I just want to mention quick. Jackson Ford, who is a DN/tight end out of Malvern Prep. He is now a 4-star player and inside the on 300 and number 218 overall. The thing that's interesting with Ford is Penn State seems pretty steadfast on him being an edge, and he continues to get offers for tight end as well. It really is kind of an even split. Now, of course, Penn State's recruiting tight ends on a different level than so many other schools, and I think that's a big part of it as well. But it's just interesting to see maybe if one position is favored over the other. Right now, he's saying all the right things. It doesn't matter. And for the most part, I think Penn State's going to be a mix in there regardless. But I am curious to see how that impacts his recruitment. And then one other guy, Nick Abrams, got to mention the McDonough linebacker, the next 4-star player from McDonough. Here we go. Penn State offers, I think they were his first offer for that July Lash Bash, right? I believe it was the Lash Bash camp in July. And, here he is now closing in on a dozen or so and really taking off. We have him at right inside the on 300 at 289 overall. He's got about 50, 60 tackles on the year, a couple sacks, really just playing smart football, a player that looks kind of, honest to God, when I watch this film and then I watched Kobe King back in the day, like there are a lot of comparisons I think between them, although he might be a little bit more athletic, I think, than what Kobe King was.
And he's long. The thing I think, it looks 6'1", but his length and his ability to move is
the thing with
above
Kobe's
where you've seen
player.
from other linebackers.
Like that's where Kobe. Would you agree with that? Like Kobe, there was always everybody wanted Kalen, right? And Kobe was kind of put off to the side a little bit because they didn't have some of the measurables and athleticism. But Kobe was such a smart player, and he still is. That's where I think Kobe shines, and I kind of feel like I see that a little bit with Nick Abrams. I'm actually trying to go down there this weekend because obviously Brandon Finney, Jeff Exner, want to see Abrams. We'll see if I can make it down there, but I want to see Nick Abrams in person.
Yeah, great length for Nick Abrams. I will say with Kobe, it was kind of misleading because you remember his junior year, his ankle was messed up. So he played on one leg and it really impacted his tape, which I think really impacted the pursuit of some of the schools, especially in that area. Everybody knew about Kalen, obviously, but Kobe showed as a senior, he was a heck of a football player. And I think that's come back around and, it's showing at the college level. So just some interesting things there. You mentioned Jackson Ford. It's been interesting to watch the trajectory of him going up, Cam Brickle kind of leveling off after taking that year and going to California and things like that. And, it's just an interesting dynamic there. And you mentioned LaSalle's got to play St. Joe's Prep. They beat St. Joe's Prep a couple weeks ago, 35-34. Gavin Sidwar, who's in the on 300 Rutgers commit as a quarterback, having an awesome year for LaSalle. And that's a really good football team right there.
Mm-hmm. It's always hard
the
to
next
beat a
thing we
team
have.
twice. We'll see where things go. It's going to be, trust me, those two teams look great. We'll see. There's some teams out west that certainly will help make a run in 6A, but I would put my money on LaSalle right now.
Yeah, the way they played Harrisburg, and unfortunately, I'm doing the thing where I watched one game and then I'm taking all my opinions off of 1 week to begin the season. But when you had that loaded Harrisburg team, and I know they didn't have their quarterback to start the year, just LaSalle's efficiency and the way they played, just it looked sharp out the gate, and they had a lot of talent. So I would agree with you there, just on
they're blowing
just a drive by, watching what they were able to do against a very good team.
Had.
And
Prep's the only close game they've had. I mean, I think every other game's been.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
LaSalle's schedule: Harrisburg, Malvern Prep, Calvert Hall, Haverford, St. Joe's Prep. They've got Roman Catholic this weekend. I mean, it's like, as high school schedules go, doesn't get much better.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next conversation, which is an update on the whiteout list. But really what we're talking about here is Ohio State and the whiteout, because those 2 weekends back to back, probably the biggest game stretch for Penn State this year and in quite some time, Ryan. I mean, having those 2 games, those 2 lists going on. I know you've been doing work on this all year long, but it's really intensified over the last couple of weeks. So what do you think now that we're on the verge of it with an away game this weekend and then Ohio State? How is everything shaping up for Penn State right now?
And what time is that?
Still very. Oh, noon. Did you hear about that? Try to tell people. No one wanted to hear it. I know, guys. I understand you don't
6
want
months
games.
You try to tell people, but okay.
Everyone wanted to Anyway, we'll move on with that one. So look, it's still very heavy Washington as far as the prospects who are confirmed. It's literally like 4-1, and I this isn't a surprise at all. We knew that game was going to be noon. I think Penn State has been strategically behind the scenes getting guys in for Washington, knowing that game was going to be noon, because at the end of the day, they have to get guys for one of these two games. Like they need to get as many as they can for one of these two, especially with Maryland being after Thanksgiving and everything that kind of goes into that. So I think that they've been strategically trying to aim guys towards the whiteout, making it more of a safer bet, I guess you would say. And you're seeing that with the list right now. We were already closing in on about 20 players for that Washington game, where the Ohio State's like 6, 7. It's not that many. Now, obviously, we're going to really ramp that up here over the weekend, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if, by this time next week, we'll be talking about way more guys than who we have confirmed at the moment. But Tavion Branch, I think, is certainly a guy we need to mention. He confirmed this past week that he's coming for both. He's coming for Ohio State and he's coming for Washington, which makes sense, right? He's from outside Scranton. It's not a hard trip for him to make, and he's obviously very, very high on Penn State. And T. Frank, I know you enjoy watching his film. He should be dominating these guys, and he is, though, and that's what you want to see, right? You want to see, if you're playing anywhere down to your competition, when you have the kind of measurables that he has, almost 6'4", 300, very explosive for that size as well, that would be a bit of a deterrent. And there is nothing there with that. And he looks like a great defensive tackle. Now, don't get me wrong, he would be an interior offensive lineman at the next level, though. Go ahead, T. Frank.
Yeah, it's just the way he moves too. So the things you're seeing him do using his hands, he's not just winning because he's bigger, faster, and stronger. He is winning because he's bigger, faster, and stronger. But the application of the things that we saw up close in person, of learning to use his hands and get better with those things, that's how you become like just comically dominant at a level like this. And I always talk about, in all of the evaluations of these athletes, pad level, hip mobility, the ability to run in multiple directions. This is a guy who's 6'4" and 300 pounds, but moves so incredibly well. You talk about pad level, drive, power, translating those skills into the next level. I don't see anything missing here other than he's not 6'6", and he doesn't have 39-inch arms. Like all of those bizarro world stats where you get some of those guys that become the 5 stars of the 5 stars. So anyway, when you're looking at all of those things you want in an offensive lineman, that's why I was so high on him. His ability to drive block, pad level, his, the ability to get his that flat back you're looking for. Anyway, I'm just repeating myself because it's really fun to watch.
He still hasn't been rated by all three, and he's a guy I want to. I'm very curious to see where Charles will rate him, because I think, obviously, again, from a skill or from a competition perspective in those things, it's kind of, you're trying to compare guys like him to, some of the best players in DC and down south who are playing stacked defensive lines all the time. It makes it difficult. But I think just from Penn State's perspective and the growth that they've seen, from what we've seen, and just how high he has risen on Penn State's board, tells me that he should be given a fair, accurate kind of rating. And I think it's fair to start him out as a high 3-star and see where things go. But I'm not Charles Power, so let's see where he ends up.
What they really look for here is the growth and progress when they get their hands on him. You saw this with Anthony Donka when he was in high school, and Branch doesn't have that overwhelming size that Donka has, but he's got a lot of the same traits of showing up, taking in the coaching, understanding what he's being taught, and then putting it into functional movement and functional behavior on the football field. And I think they've been really pleased with that, because it's usually a harbinger of success at that position when you can sort of take those things and put it into action quickly. So the competition is what it is. You're not going to find him at Gonzaga or DeMatha or anything like that playing against that competition. But at the same time, like a lot of the bend, a lot of the footwork and things like that could translate over. So I think there's a positive. I agree with Ryan, probably a high 3-star type guy right now. 88 is probably where I'd slot him in our rankings. And I think that'd be fair. He's not going to be on the national level yet because of where he's at, I think. And maybe that's good for Penn State. They want him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And one of those guys that can outperform that ranking, if he were to end up staying there in that kind of general area, somebody that I think has the chance to outperform that ranking because of all those physical markers. But it is fair to point out, like, the film and the execution, all those things are great, but when you're never challenged, what do you really know? Where is that kind of threshold? So, I think the conversation on both sides, you can have it as we go throughout his recruiting process.
And what was good about that, though, he was challenged at Penn State this summer, and I get it. One-on-ones and stuff aren't what they are with real pads on. But remember, he camped 3 times, came to the Lash Bash Whiteout camp too. Like, he has gone against some quality guys up close and in front of Troutman, and that's, I think, what excites them. And again, like, it really comes back to, this is a guy who just got better and better and better after every one of those camps, and coachability, especially on the offensive line, is massive.
And that's the risk you take when you go after a smaller school guy. You know, this is not a Division I, pipeline or anything like that. I think back, you and it always, to me, it always goes back to the early part of my career. A guy like Josh Marks at Southern Columbia, who was just bigger than everyone, just country strong type guy. If you get him in camp, you can expose some of the things that eventually came and caught him on the back end, which was just, it wasn't there athletically. So like getting him in camp and seeing the way that he moves, not necessarily completing the block, because one-on-ones are, kind of a crap show sometimes on the offensive defensive line, but like seeing him put himself in the right position, seeing his feet get in the right position can kind of tell you the direction that they're supposedly going. And still, you're going to have a 50% hit rate on the offensive line anyway. So, you get as much data as you possibly can, and you go from there.
Josh Marks, hell of a throwback.
That's a heck of a pull, man.
Wow.
I was just thinking small school guys, and they've had some small school guys that have been good. Even, you can even classify Sal Wormley, who probably is the comp for every 6'3", 6'4", 305-pound interior offensive lineman that we're going to have, like Michael Troutman, like Tavion Branch, all these guys. Like, that's going to be sort of the blueprint for what you're looking for, and you can find some of that stuff. I mean, Sal was not a guy that was on the radar until camp season. Not so much the school camp, but the sneaker camp type thing. He came out, I think he won an Under Armour MVP or something like that. And all of a sudden he blows up, and now he's in his 9th year here at Penn State.
I don't want to throw gasoline on this fire and then run away, but my question about Pennsylvania schools in general is, like, how many big schools are there? Like, is Cathedral Prep a small school? Is Wyomissing a small school in terms of, like, their profile to put a guy on a national stage? I understand that this is a very small school. We're talking about Tavion Branch, but unless you're in Philly or Pittsburgh, they're kind of all small schools, aren't they?
So Cathedral Prep's not. Cathedral Prep, and it goes back a little bit further than you were following. Like, they had some dudes, everybody's going to talk about Bob Sanders, but Charles Rush and all those guys at the, sort of like my age, which is a long time
I went
ago.
to school with at the same time as some of those guys. So I do, it's big in Erie, but I guess like that is, I guess, I guess that's a fair point of the history of a school like that.
It's like a, it's like a state college high rise. It's like you have those things that pop up and you see them above everything else, even though it's not a big city type thing. But you see Cathedral Prep. I mean, McDowell's not a big school, but Cooper Cousins came from there. But yeah, you've got those little pockets there. You got Pittsburgh, you got Harrisburg, you've got some of the Lehigh Valley, but not really. And then Philly, obviously. But you got to essentially work harder those other schools to get noticed. I mean, that's kind of how it's always been. Wyomissing, I do think, is a small school, and you kind of see the way that they run their offense and the way that Javen arrived, and it's very small school. It's wing T small school oriented type stuff. Like that's what you're looking at. And a lot goes into that. So it's one reason that Ryan and I said Javen was a good prospect and wasn't as high as, we had him ranked. So
it just was a limited. Yeah. You just limited on everything that he could do. I mean, it was just a lot of wing T, a lot of pools and all that. Cathedral Prep was a 4A school when Juice Scruggs was there. I think, what are they now? Probably around 4A as well. But they were playing in the highest classification. I remember seeing him play against, I think it was Prep in one of those state championships back in the year. But I mean, it depends on, I think we talk about size-wise being big, but like, there's so many Catholic schools that are actually pretty small, but they're just stacked with talent, right? So, you can
or they play in leagues that have a prestige about them, right? Like,
Penn State's a big state.
Of the school.
Or Penn State. Yeah. Pennsylvania is a big state, and that's why I honestly, they don't separate public and Catholic schools here, which I know fans would like to see more, but it's just kind of hard for McDevitt. I mean, McDevitt in Harrisburg would be playing Philly schools, and they would stack up with like a Central Catholic. They can't be traveling like that. Where Bishop Guilford would be a little bit closer, but they're way smaller than a school like McDevitt. I mean, that's why they cannot separate it that way. So, but there's plenty of talent in this state, and there always will be. It'll always be a top 10 state for high school talent, no doubt about that.
Speaking of top 10 in a bunch of different areas, and no doubt that this is a big school in the state, Harrisburg, Kevin Brown, unfortunately was injured early in the year. Ryan, you've been covering this story and you had an update recently. Fans can go read it at bluewhiteillustrated.com, but what's the update with Kevin Brown that you want to share today?
Yeah, I caught up with his dad, Tim, yesterday. Really appreciate him giving me a little bit of time there to get a feel for Kevin. It's been out there. I mean, he broke his right foot, I believe it was, had a screw basically put into his fifth metatarsal, which is, basically connecting the outside pinky toe to the interior of your foot there. And that was an injury that was going to last about 2 to 3 months rehab. Well, here we are. We're 2 months basically in now. If Harrisburg wins this weekend, they'll have a bye before they enter the District 3 playoffs starting what would it be, November 8th, so the weekend of the whiteout game. That's where I think the absolute earliest would be there. And even then, I'm not so sure. I think Harrisburg would probably have to win a playoff game, get to the semifinals of District 3, and then we could maybe be a little more realistic on Kevin and his status. Maybe he could come back and play for them. But, the most important thing is that he's ahead of schedule, according to all of his doctors, doing rehab 2-3 times a day, been cleared to lift, no explosive movements, things like that yet. But from what has been explained to me, everything's gone smoothly. And, from a Penn State fan perspective, all you want is to make sure that he's 100% next year. And obviously when he gets to State College in the years to come. So really special athlete, though. It's been a bummer not to see him. I caught up with Charles the other day, and we were talking about all the types of guys in the on 300, and before we ended the call, he was just like, man, you have no idea how upset I am that I haven't been able to really watch Kevin Brown film, because it's one of the more exciting offensive line films to watch, just the way he's able to move and all those things. But hopefully everything goes smooth there. We're great to see him play. I'd love to be able to catch a Kevin Brown game in mid-November, but we'll see. Harrisburg's right on the bubble of having a bye week too, so that'll be interesting. They have CD East this weekend, who is right there mid-pack in District 3 playoffs. So District 3 actually has a really exciting week coming up. Cumberland Valley, I saw somebody mention Tyler Merrill in the chat earlier. Cumberland Valley plays Cedar Cliff, and they're like 9-11 in the power rankings, and 10 teams make it into the 6A. So if you're in Harrisburg, there are some kind of exciting games this weekend. East and Harrisburg on Saturday, and then whoever wins that Cedar Cliff Cumberland Valley game will likely be one of the lower seeds, and that may impact Merrill getting up for the whiteout game. But as of right now, to answer your question in the chat, we do expect him to be up here in a couple of weeks.
This is just a chock full of offensive line segment and show, because the last thing we're going to get here before the game preview is we got updated highlights from one of Penn State's most underrated prospects. Fitz, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were doing a clip. Michael Troutman is one of the best players in Penn State's class. And I say players, we use players and prospects back and forth, but this is a player type thing, because his senior or midseason senior film is out. He looks really good. He's a really good player. Again, he's limited in growth. He's maybe 6'3", 300 pounds, got long arms. He's got all that stuff that we've talked about before. But man, he can bury some kids. It's fun to watch. You look at some of the stuff. He's playing guard. He's playing two ways, but great base. I could see him being a center at the next level as well. There's just a lot to like here in terms of him being a football player, and him being a football player that's probably a little bit more ready to contribute than some of the other guys in his class. It will take some time for Owen Alicini to adjust and become a college offensive lineman, which is it should be the expectation. It will take more time for Malachi Goodman as well. But Troutman's a guy that you could probably throw out there a little bit earlier than those other two and have some success with it. So just had some fun watching his midseason stuff. I appreciate him getting that done. He told me a couple of weeks ago that he was going to get that done. So I appreciate getting it out there. We recently bumped him, I think, up a point to an 88 in the on-3 rankings. And yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, because he's just a heck of a football player, and you need those guys on your roster. It's not always about being 6'6" and 35-inch arms and all that stuff. It's about being a good football player. And I think Troutman really fits that bill. We were sort of perplexed when Penn State took him, just based on the back of the backlog of the last 5 years of not taking guys that are typically that short, but saw what they liked. And I think he's developed into a really, really good player.
That's exactly what I was going to just say. I'll raise my hand and say I kind of put him off to the side because I didn't think he fit the mold of what they were looking for the longest time. And then sure enough, I don't know, maybe a month and a half before he commits, we're learning, oh, wait, he's actually like maybe one of their most important interior targets at the moment. And, everything we've seen on film is stacked up really well. And by the way, he's playing at DePaul Catholic. Like, he is playing some serious guys up there in North Jersey. One of those clips there, Malvern Prep. I don't know if he's going against Cam Brickle or not, but
I didn't get to the one, but yeah, I think he had a pancake a Cam Brickle on
Yeah.
one of those that we didn't get to.
He's playing quality teams up there. I was able to go up there about a month ago now and see some of the teams up there, and they are stacked with talent. Even if they're not true, FBS Power 5 guys. I mean, there are so many future Delaware and Richmond and quality college players on those teams that you should be very encouraged when watching his highlights, because he's going against quality players almost every single week.
Last thing we got for you here on the show today is our Penn State Wisconsin preview. What's going to happen on the field this weekend, plus our predictions of the game. If you got some predictions you want to put in the chat, I'll throw a couple of them up here as we discuss this matchup. Of course, I gave my preview with Greg yesterday, so we're going to be focusing on what Fitz and what Ryan think is going to happen between the Nittany Lions and the Badgers coming up Saturday, 7:30 primetime game. Fitz, let's start with you and let's talk about the Penn State offense. How do you see this matchup playing out, and what is a key for you for a Penn State success on that side of the ball?
I'm very curious, and I think a lot of what you're saying is going to go back to running the football, but I'm very curious, and the things that I've picked up from Wisconsin on that side this week is there's not a ton of respect for Penn State's receivers, and I know that kind of falls in line with Penn State fans for most of the last 2 years. But you've got a situation where everyone's talking Tyler Warren, and every time Tyler Warren's referenced, it's this guy behind him, Trey Wallace, I assume, has about half as many catches. So I don't think there's a ton of respect on the outside for Penn State. I'm very curious to see how Penn State sort of exploits that. You've mentioned on the show they play a lot of cover 2, so it's going to be finding those gaps and finding those spots either in the middle of the field or in that cover 2 buster zone behind the corner to the side of the safety, and that's where Trey Wallace comes into play for me. So I'm very curious to see what kind of role he can take. Obviously had the big game against West Virginia, and he's played well, I think. But I don't think he's gotten the target share opportunity that we maybe thought he would get after seeing him against West Virginia. So he's made the most of it. He's caught the ball across the middle. And I will say this, I think Penn State's receivers have done a really good job catching the football this year, which, hey, baby steps, but at the same time, baby steps forward is what we're talking here. So I'm very curious to see how Penn State's receivers impact this game. I think they can do it. I think they're athletic. I'm still, like, even after watching more of Wisconsin, I'm still perplexed in terms of what they are, because you've got bad losses against Alabama and USC, who are frankly not as good as we thought they would be coming into the season. And then you've got those 3 last wins over Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. Purdue was reeling big time at the time. Rutgers, I thought was going to be okay this year, just not deep enough to deal with all the injuries they've had. And then Northwestern just can't move the football. So, like, I don't know what you take from that. So, like, the roller coaster that is Wisconsin football this year still hasn't really given us a great idea of how they stack up in a game like this. Now, you're playing the scenario, you're playing a night game at Camp Randall Stadium, which makes it more dangerous. And I think that that's very interesting. And I think that can play some into it, but I still think Penn State, better football team, and they're going to have an opportunity to sort of dictate how this one goes.
James Franklin talked about last night that Braden Locke has gotten better over the time and he's gotten more comfortable as the starting quarterback since he had to go into the game against Alabama. And you could see, like, the shell shock of the moment on him in that particular game. And I guess after the show yesterday, I went and I watched the Rutgers game and I watched some of the deep passes. Some really good throws on tape, irrespective of your opponent. Those were some good throws. And I think that is an area, just generally that Penn State has to be aware of. But you would say, like, Ryan, between the Wisconsin receivers and the Penn State defensive backs, I mean, who has the advantage there in your mind?
Well, I haven't watched a whole lot of Wisconsin's receivers, if I'll be honest with you. Now, Penn State's defensive backs have been up and down at times this year, but I think that they have played better in recent weeks. The thing that I'm going to come back to, the main thing, though, not to avoid your question, T. Frank, but, like, I still feel like this is run game dependent for Penn State's offense. Like, Sean, do you not feel that way? Like, because you were saying you kind of want to get, because I mean, just look at Wisconsin has not played the run very well this year, guys.
No,
like they've been pushed around, especially in the second half, which sets up great for Penn State. Like this is the Illinois game to me. Like, this is what this is going to be, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a good comparison. With a better offensive line for Wisconsin than Illinois had, which I think is.
I don't even know about that though, man. I get that they rank well in metrics, but, like, everybody thought, Penn State's struggling. They kicked Luke Altmaier's ass that night, and, like, I think that they can get after Wisconsin as well. Like, they rank really well against crappy teams, and Alabama's defensive line is not what it was supposed to be, but like I know they haven't given up more than 2 sacks in a game, but like I feel like the metrics here don't really show what Wisconsin is. And then when I've listened to other people who follow Wisconsin, like different podcasts and stuff this week, like I haven't seen many of them predicting Wisconsin to get an upset. Like they are more down on Wisconsin than I think Penn State fans are perceiving them to be.
Yeah, it's not Wisconsin offensive line circa 2010 or anything like that. But here's the thing. The left side of the line, I think, is genuinely probably the best combo that Penn State's seen this year. The left guard, the left tackle, those guys can run block. You know, those two move guys. They work well together. They pass off in zone really well. They're able to get reach blocks, and I think they're both good pass protectors. Now, it is protected by the scheme. Like Braden Locke does not hold on to the football. So that is a big part of it. Is there anything else here with the Penn State offense like that you want to focus on? We talked about the receivers and Trey Wallace. And do you think it is another big Tyler Warren game despite the conversation around that, Fitz? Or do you think they're going to be able to adapt and get more guys involved in this situation?
I would probably take the under on Tyler Warren if he's got 17 catches. But other than that, no, I think they still go to him. They still use him and utilize him in the ways that, you know, sort of make him so dangerous. And what I was listening to Mike Tressel earlier this week, and he said he was asked about what Penn State does, and they move things around and they try to, number one, hide people, aka Tyler Warren snapping the football. You didn't see that coming. And number two, they move guys around to get you to think. I think Wisconsin's defense terrified to think, and they've been playing very fast against not good teams, but been playing very fast and doing a really good job. So they're confident. Mm-hmm. There's some confidence there. If Penn State can move them around and get them mixed up, you could see busted coverage. You could see things like
That's a really good point.
That will make this game potentially have some snowball capability. It's just a matter of, you know, Penn State exploiting that, Penn State making and executing the throws. And then on top of that, you know, staying consistent in the run game. You know, Nick Singleton's got a couple of weeks to get better. And you hope that he's in the spot where he was earlier this year, where he's breaking off those big runs. And that's kind of where it comes back to me with the running game is they've been consistent, but not overwhelming. So that's been something to go around. You got to get some big plays in the run game. Do we see the reemergence of Omari Evans this week? I think that's a possibility as well. So you've got some things that can work for Penn State. It's just a matter of handling the situation and you know, sort of exploiting what Wisconsin's going to put in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to end. Let's move on to the defense and talk about another thing that Penn State fans really want, and that is sacks and pressure. Christian says need to get pressure from the Penn State defense. So kind of going into that conversation about Braden Locke, something I found this week, in situations where he's moved off the spot or he's under pressure, he is the third worst quarterback in college football. He has a average completion of 3.5 yards and something like a sub 40% completion percentage under pressure. So those two things put together, you know, I know, Ryan, you said that you think Penn State's defense can get after it from a
right
structural perspective. Bowling Green had a similar plan: run the ball, be tenacious, get the ball out quick. Do you see any sort of blueprint to hang around in this?
Illinois had a similar plan too. To just that, it really was. I mean, Illinois was throwing short stuff all game, but I think Penn State's defense will be fine. Again, they're going to get the ball out quick, but they've done a great job at containment all year. And you know, if you can limit them to 5, 6, 7 yard passes throughout the game, you're going to be in a good spot. So I think it is really critical, important for Penn State's defense to come out very strong, just because we've seen this offense struggle in first halves, especially first quarters and times like that. So to me, this is a 13-10 game at halftime, and then Penn State's offense takes over in the second half. I still feel very confident that Penn State's defense can maintain, contain, limit to maybe a touchdown, maybe 10 points in the first half, and do what they've done all year, which is dominate in the third quarter.
Fitz, any other thoughts on either offense or defense? Because I'm leaning on you for special teams before we get to our predictions here.
Wisconsin's -3 in the turnover game. They put the ball on the ground quite a bit. They've got 13 fumbles this year. They've lost 7 of them. They've got a bunch of interceptions. So Penn State has not been overly aggressive in turning the ball over. but they may have some opportunities this weekend. So I'm curious about that. Yes, they get the ball out quick. Yeah, I mean, just play the broken record here. You get the ball out quick, which is going to negate some of the pressure, but not all of the pressure. And I think that the pressure can still get there. Guys like Abdul, Denai, the usual suspects, Zane Durant especially.
Zane Durant,
Again, it's the same basic thing. Don't get too far upfield. Don't over pursue, and Penn State should be fine. Yards don't score points. Completion percentage doesn't score points. Wisconsin's, I think, 46% on third downs. That's going to be sort of an interesting test to see how Penn State can respond to that. But I think some of those numbers are kind of juiced by the competition they've played in the last couple of weeks. So I do think there's plenty of advantages for Penn State here. Again, playing the scenario, playing the situation probably keeps it a little bit closer than it should be. But at the same time, the talent on the field, the depth on the field, I think is strongly in Penn State's favor.
Cliff, are you trolling us here?
Of course, Cliff, Cliff. Of course, he's.
I mean, I understand what he's saying. Like, just the spot is a bad spot. I thought,
but
okay.
We had a whole segment yesterday dedicated to how this wasn't a trap game with Greg, and I'm just like, to come in the next day and be like, "Yo, trap game." Like, I don't know if he's trolling us or because like that is a common theme with Penn State fans this week. Okay,
behind
very
the curtain,
good. Yes.
Frank, behind the curtain. I've already texted Cliff. He's one of my college buddies.
What's funny to me about Greg's take with that, though, is that like Greg knows gambling well, those sports betting lines and things like that. And like, if you look at a lot of the top professional gamblers and things around the country, like they would kind of classify this as that, though, just because of the spot with Ohio State next week. And, oh, by the way, coming off a bye, which Penn State's 3-6 all time against Big Ten teams under Franklin, coming off buys. Like there are things there where I kind of disagree with Greg a little bit on that. Now, at the same time, I do feel like Penn State's substantially more talented than Wisconsin, and that should play out on the field. But I don't know. There are some metrics there that kind of would hint towards that.
All right, well, let's see what you think then, Ryan. We'll start with you. Our game predictions here to end the week on the BWI Live Show. What do you think is going to happen? Tell us how you think the game is playing out and what your prediction was this week.
24-14 is my score. Look, I feel like Penn State can get into the 30s too. I just feel like I could see their offense starting slow off a bye week. They've kind of started slow in quite a few games, and that's what's going to limit this. Like I said, I can see 14-10 at halftime, somewhere in that kind of ballpark. I could even either way, Wisconsin maybe leaning, whatever it may be. But I fully expect Penn State's defense to take over in the second half. Penn State's offense, especially in the run game, to take over in the second half, just like they did against Illinois. That has been an issue for Wisconsin against the top teams that they've played. They have worn down in the second half, and I fully expect Penn State to be able to do that. Obviously, let's see if Nick Singleton's healthy. I think he should be by now, hopefully, after a couple of weeks to rest. And, he obviously was able to play against USC, so it's nothing major. But I see this being another heavy dose of ground game. Maybe Aller gets to 200 yards passing, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's more than 200 yards rushing.
Fitz, what do you think?
I've got Penn State 27, Wisconsin 14. Short of me 3 points there, but
my bad. Wrong graphic.
Yeah, I know. Ryan Barker is going to come after you. No, I think that Penn State's going to have an opportunity. I think it's going to be close in the first half. I do. Wisconsin's been up and down in terms of fast starts. They've kind of hung their hat on it through this 3-game stretch, but obviously you go back to the opponent, it matters. So they got walloped right off the bat against Alabama. So you just keep going back and figuring which batch of games you want to compare this to. And, obviously I think with Penn State, you got to side with Alabama and USC. So I think Penn State's going to have an opportunity to, sort of flesh out that gap in the second half. They've been phenomenal in the third quarter and maybe get a turnover too. It'd be nice to see them going in that direction. I think the running back is very good. I think the offensive line is, solid, which makes them a good college offensive line. Penn State's defensive line probably going to be tested a little bit more than they're used to, but they're going to have the opportunity to make some plays there on the back end as well.
Yeah, and just because I haven't really talked about it in detail, I think the center for Wisconsin, I think 67 is his number. Really athletic guy, could get pushed around. 71, really athletic for being 6'8", but is a 6'8" sort of athletic where if Dennis Sutton gets under his pads, that's going to be a problem for the right tackle. And that's something that I think ultimately in these situations, talk about a good challenge for Penn State. I think these are good challenges that they can overcome. It's interesting with the number of analysts, with the changes to some of the things in Penn State's structure. I think they come out hot after this bye week. And also, I'm believing in Andy Kotelnicki as a leader on the offensive side and Drew Aller as a quarterback, that they are going to get off to faster starts, which means also the points total as well. So they have not reached that 40-point total regularly this year, but 30s are manageable. I feel a little bit like Wisconsin might challenge Penn State more after watching Braden Locke against these other teams. Fitz is right to point out it is Rutgers, it is Northwestern, but he has looked like a competent quarterback where he did not, both in my preseason evaluation of him from last year and in some of the early games that we saw from him this year. So I think they can challenge Penn State, but Penn State wins. They get into the 30s. That's what I got for this game. Fitz, any final thoughts to get us out of here?
Not really. I think that Penn State's going to have an opportunity to do this on a national stage, even though I still don't know that Wisconsin's a good team, but it would be a heck of a win. I mean, you every game's hard, and that's what I keep going back to is you just avoid the Vanderbilt, avoid all the upsets that are coming this way or that are coming that way. And hey, at the end of the day, the zero in the loss column is what matters. And whether you win by 3 or you win by 25, you're on to the next week. So I think that's what I keep going back to and keep hammering home in this 12-team playoff is just keep your record as sparkling as long as you can.
Follow over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com to get more information from Ryan about recruiting news and high school news, all those things. Fitz will be with me for the postgame show coming up this weekend. More predictions, more previews coming on Saturday in the Penn State football tailgate show in conjunction with Seven Mountains Media. We're going to be live from the Field Burger and Tap in State College. So come out, say hi, join us, have a burger. It's going to be a great time as we preview Penn State, Wisconsin coming up Saturday. Oh, by the way, it is a 4:30 airtime for the tailgate show coming up this weekend. So make sure you join us and we'll have a good time together. We'll preview the game, then join us after the game for the postgame show. Don't leave. We like hanging out. We'll talk to you.